Hello, and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. I'm your host, Megan Rounds, and welcome to the show. Today's guest resides in Edmond, Oklahoma with her best friend and only child, a 12-year-old rescue mutt named Griffin. She owns a spiritual healing business, our guest, not the dog, although the dog probably participates as mine do. She owns a spiritual healing business as a healing artist with a palette that includes energy healing, massage therapy, empowerment coaching, and spiritual teaching. Using her gifts of claircognizance and clairsentience, she senses physical symptoms in others using healing modalities such as energy healing and massage to clear them. During her 2 years in the lab, she has become a designated practitioner and lab moderator and spends most of her time in the main lab, the circle, and in certain lab-related course groups. She also has a bi-weekly program called Spirit Song that you can catch every other Monday starting at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Please give a warm Lightworkers welcome to Nicole Powers. Hi, Nicole. Welcome.
Hi, Megan. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to just adjust my chair. It's great to see you here.
It's good to see you too.
And you sound great, so thank you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, everything seems really good. If you start getting like the low battery warning or something like that, just let me know and we'll deal, right?
I will let you know. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, so you've been on the show before, and I forgot to look up the exact date. The link to that previous show and the replay will be available on the show notes page when I send that out. So anybody who missed that first conversation can go back and look at that as well if you're interested. And in that one, we talked about Nicole's spiritual journey and all of that fun stuff. This time, we're going to talk about some other fun things going on.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched upon a couple of ideas, Nicole. If you want to go that direction, that's cool. If you have something else in mind, that's fine too. But I'll throw it over to you to lead the way in what you'd like to discuss.
Wow. I don't know. I really don't know what I want to discuss. Megan and I had talked about some things that are going on in our lives, in our spiritual process now, which is surrender and going with the flow. And I know you had said you did a little class on Thursday with that topic. So that's right where I am in my spiritual journey right now, is pressing even deeper into surrendering and letting go of more and more control and ideas of my own, and really trusting God, Spirit, the universe to lead the way. And, it's not always easy to do that. And so,
No.
No. But I really believe that surrender and acceptance both are the key to a solid spiritual cooperation between me and spirit. Because if I think there's a really healthy balance between following God's will or what I'm guided to versus using my own free will. I feel like when I use my free will to line up or come into alignment with what spirit has for me, that's when life goes really smoothly, when I feel really content and happy and serene. And when I'm not doing that, things get a little nutty for me. I worry more, I have more anxiety, I feel more depression, I feel, I just feel off balance in a lot of ways. And I think that as a spiritual person, someone who really, I say like, God is my homie, like he's my best friend, he's my partner in crime. But my relationship with God is not stale. It's not like this, oh, I'm perfect and I love God and I never do anything wrong. My relationship is not like that. And for a long time, I thought that it was supposed to be like that. That it was supposed to be like, it's sort of like Santa Claus. I think I used to see God a lot like Santa, where if you're good, then, you follow the rules and you're a good girl, then you'll have spiritual riches. And if you're bad, you get punished. And today I've thrown all of that out. And so today it's just really about like one day at a time. What am I supposed to be doing today? How can I show up and work with spirit, work with God, to just have a life that I enjoy living? Because really, I think that's part of the spiritual journey, is living is living life. And, I don't do that very well when I'm not connected, because I just, I just feel like there's, I just feel a little bit like, well, I don't know what the word is, but just kind of like, la-di-da, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. So I'll just do this or do that. And then it doesn't seem like things get done, and things don't feel, empowered. And I'm all about empowerment. That's really like my, freedom and empowerment are probably my two guiding, the things I love the most. And balance, maybe a close third, but it's like freedom and being empowered in my own self. Those are two things I'm not willing to give up. But when I don't surrender, I do give them up on accident.
I mean, you're so hitting home with what you've said. And we really share those three aspects.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, those are my three too. And, but what you said about how it is when you're kind of trying to do your own problem solving and in a sense disconnecting from spirit, I've felt that a lot really recently. It's really interesting because I'm going through this humongous, multifaceted transformation that I do not yet know what it is. There's so incredibly much uncertainty in my life, more than I've ever had. And I'm usually...
Me too!
Yeah, see, I mean, it's like usually I'm cool with it. It's like uncertainty hasn't always really freaked me out. This one in particular does, and I'm getting those like high anxiety attacks, which I don't think I've ever had until now. And it's showing up in really weird ways. And I'm having these weird laughing, crying, hysteric things that I've not really had before either. Probably freaking my husband out, but he's been kind enough not to say that. He just kind of looks at me like, I don't know what to do. And then that's cool. Let him just like not say anything, But I've been really wondering about that sense of connection, because what's different for me this time than in previous changes or points of uncertainty is that I know that I'm connected. I'm continuously reminding myself that I'm connected, yet it's so easy for me to fall into problem solving mode with this particular, I mean, in part to gain some level of certainty, because otherwise I really seriously feel like I'm like in a tornado, it's like, okay. And at times I'm like, okay. So now I had gotten a little notice. Okay. There's something, it's like I feel like I'm surrendering, but I must not be fully surrendering. And it's almost like I know that the universe doesn't give tests. If anything, they're self-imposed tests. And if just a full sense of surrender. And I don't have the answer to that. And I don't know that you have the answer either, but I'm curious what your insights about that are.
So I missed parts of it. So I'm going to just go off of what I did here, because it's kind of skipping around.
Sure.
But I think that one of my very first mentors and one of my spiritual mothers, almost, she sort of re-raised me in a spiritual way. She would say, when I would say like, well, it's like you're on, and you've got, you were hanging on with your hands, and you let go of one hand, but then you didn't really let go of the other hand. And then you thought, okay, I'll let go a little more. And you took almost all your fingers off, but you had just like one pinky grip, just like holding on to the edge. And she said, you got to let go with all of your hands. You have to let go completely. And, I don't really honestly, I think other people outside of us know better when we're doing that because for me, my experience, I feel like I've let go. I have no attachment to this. But if I really had no attachment to it, I probably wouldn't worry about it. I probably wouldn't those high and low emotional places. I would just be open to whatever comes next. And that does not happen often in my life. I think when I fully surrender, it's very magical. It happens pretty rarely. And it's always what I'm like striving towards. But it's like, some people think of as enlightenment as something you achieve. And then, you're like this enlightened person. And I don't see it that way. I see it as like it happens in a moment, but it can also unhappen in the next moment. And so for me, I'm surrendered, and then I'll take back a little bit of my control. It's really, for me, it comes down to control. I want process, but when I take that a little too far, then I know that I'm like trying to control the situation. And usually that doesn't help the situation for me.
Things feel chaotic, to really try to release that need for control. And I do think at times it is a need. It is like jumping off a cliff, except there's a tree hanging there, and it's like, oh wait, never mind, I don't want to jump off of this cliff yet. And grasping on and really resisting change is what I think a part of it is. And I can feel it viscerally, like in my body now, which I never really could before. So I've been working on releasing that stuff. But at the same point, I almost think that I've taken the leap, and then I've decided I'm going to control the descent.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't even know how I'm trying. It's like, wait, I'm surrendering, I'm letting go. But only if I can take a smooth sail down to ground,
Mm-hmm.
and avoid all hangups along the way. And so it's like a conditional surrender.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Conditional surrender. I think that's what most of us do. I think most of us who are on a spiritual journey, we want to surrender. We want to work with spirit, but we also, there's like this, but only if, it's going to look in a way that I can handle.
Yeah.
And,
And we're
if it's
deciding.
going to be smooth sailing. Yeah.
Yeah. We're saying, oh, this is what I can handle, not what you're giving to me. I've been thinking a lot about that because, of course, there's that adage that the universe only dishes out what you can handle. And I've been questioning that lately. It's like, I don't know, this feels like a lot more than I am able to deal with without losing it,
Yeah.
losing my mind, And then again, that, of course, represents growth, too, I think. It's like, not that I always want to have this level of uncertainty and chaos in my life, but at the same point in the future, when little, smaller things that may have had greater reactions from me occur again, I'll be like, that's nothing,
Exactly.
I'll be, of course, empathetic to other people who are going through it, but it's also nice to be a guiding light for other people who may not have had these types of experiences before, to let them know that it is something that they'll make it through. Right now, that's been hard for me to find people who are like, you can do that. I mean, I have friends who are supportive and things, but with the people I'm going through with it, or going through it with, are not able to be that support because they're in the same place. And I think that's another hard thing for me, is that it's a lot easier for me to surrender when I'm the only one experiencing it. But this is this is more than me. And so when I start worrying, it's about me to start with, and then it expands to include others. And then I start getting into that whole feedback loop of worry and fear. And then I notice it, and then I start like meditate. I mean, I've been trying to meditate daily anyway, but practicing with toning and chanting. There's like this free sound healing program that Hay House has done with Jonathan Goldman, I think is his name.
Ooh.
It's really cool. But you have to watch it every single day, and it's like an hour each time. So I've been doing that as a part of my meditation. But for me, as a person who really gravitates towards sound and vibration and frequencies, this is like hitting the nail on the head for me. It's like, well, this is great. Something I'll incorporate into my practice longer term, I think. But it doesn't get rid of all of that. I have to really be conscious and intentional. And then almost create a practice of, I've been visualizing jumping off that cliff.
Interesting.
And that's where I noticed I'm trying to control the descent, though. It's like, oh, I have
Yeah.
wings and I'm just gliding, like if I had a hang glider. And I think that's maybe counterproductive to to that full release, you know. But yeah, it's just I've always wondered about surrender and letting go. I used to ask years ago, what does it mean? And I wonder if this is the answer, you know, that I am now experiencing, not yet, but on the way to experiencing what that really truly means and feels like.
Yeah. I think that it's one of those things that we resist a little bit just because of, even just the word surrender, I think can trigger
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
because it sounds like you're losing something or that you're
giving up.
Giving up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, but it's like the little analogy of a kid with his hand in the candy jar. You know, if he would just let go of some of those candies, he could eat the whole jar by sticking his hand back in there multiple times. But when he gathers all the candy, he can't get his hand out and then he gets no candy. So you have to let go in order to receive something. And so for me, really kind of like keeping in perspective what it means when I surrender. I surrender to win, not to lose. And I have had big moments of like really intense surrender. Like there's nothing else I can do. I've done everything that I thought would better the situation, or, you know, and it's just like, I've had to just say, okay, I cannot on my own move through this. And so God, it's yours. You figure it out. Like I'm done. And every time I do that, and you know, I wish I could say that I did that more with a more like loving, open heart. But normally when I surrender, it's like, okay, forget it. I'm done. Like, I don't know. And it's from a place of inner, you know, just, yeah, I'm not getting anywhere. And so, but because I've had those moments of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to move through this. You're going to have to do it. I'm done. Then that's when Spirit can show up and show me how really amazing the spiritual solutions are, because most of the time the way through it is something I never could have thought of. Like it would have never occurred to me that that's how it was going to turn out, or that that's what it was going to, you know, be. And always on the other side, looking back, I know how beautiful surrender is, but when I'm in it, I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know?
I love what you said about you're in it to win, not to lose. I think that's a really great way of reframing that word so that it works for you. And now I can do that too. So thank you for sharing, because I had not gotten to that point yet. And I find, you know, this experience attaches to a couple of different things. One that came to me right away, and then another that was something I've just been observing between the differences in how I respond and my husband responds to this particular situation. Now, I've always known that when it comes down to it, I mean, I can be a fighter, but typically my initial reaction to major conflict and issues and well, not uncertainty, but more the fear and anxiety parts is to flee. It's to run away, and at least get into my own space, right? Well, his is to fight, and he is determined to make it through this, and I admire that, but it shows up, these differences, in that he oftentimes wants to see that fight in me. And I'm at this time trying to surrender, which is kind of the opposite of being, you know, of fighting through it. And it's just created this really interesting dichotomy. Interesting to me, pretty frustrating for him. And me too at sometimes, because I'm like, look, I'm trying a different tack here. And he's like, well, it's not working, you know. It's like, okay, well, how do I do this in relationship with somebody who has a very different approach? And that's more of a hypothetical question, but certainly if you have insights, I'm totally open to it.
Yeah, I think I don't have insight about how to do partnership when you're so, you know, when you're coming at it differently, except for maybe just accept where he is, and you can't force him to accept where you are. But I think the thing I see about that is that fight or flight are the same mechanism. You know, it comes from the same source, which is fear. When we're afraid, we go into fight or flight. Some of us fight, some of us flee, some of us freeze. And then but none of those choices are surrender. They're
Right.
So you're both doing the same thing, even though it looks different in the actions you're taking. And one thing that I use as a tool for myself is something called the three A's, which I've taught a class on in the lab. But the first one is awareness, and then acceptance, and then action. And so for me, when I'm aware of something like a change or something new or new information that in my world that doesn't feel good, that's the awareness. And then I have to take a season of acceptance to just be comfortable with the reality of what I'm aware of. And before I take action, because for me, if I want to jump to action because I don't want to sit in the discomfort or the tension or the uncertainty. And so I don't want to accept it. I just want to get it. Like, I like to check the box off. Like, that's done and over, and it's wrapped up in a pretty bow. Yeah. Like, we're done. And it doesn't work that way. So I have to just really be willing to be uncomfortable for however long, until I really feel that sense of acceptance. And that's when I know I've surrendered. When I feel that, like, I'm connecting my own dots, when I feel that sense of acceptance, it looks like any choice that I choose is okay. Like, I've done this in the past with romantic relationships, of not knowing if I wanted to stay or go in a relationship, not knowing if this was the right relationship for me, kind of seeing some red flags, and then processing, like, is this the guy? Is this not the guy? Is this good for me? Is this not good for me? Am I learning a lesson, or is it damaging? Is it toxic? Those things. And I want to just know, is this the right person or not, so that I can either stay and work on it or leave. And I don't want to waste my time. And that's an illusion that my ego will tell me, is don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. But until I'm okay with either answer, I don't feel. There's been so many times when I've broken up with someone, or I've stayed in a relationship just to do something, and I still didn't know what I really wanted, and I didn't feel good about it. I might have broken up with someone and regretted it, or felt like, was that, still questioned myself, because I didn't give myself space to just really get comfortable with, I'll be okay either way. And no matter what I do, I know God's got my back, and it will all be for my good. I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons for me is I cannot do it wrong, because I still have that deep thing in me, kind of going back to the initial thing about, like, seeing God as Santa Claus, and seeing, like, if I do something wrong, then my journey might not go as well as I want it to. And that's just not true. It's just false. I cannot screw it up. I can't do it wrong. So no matter what choice I make, my higher power, my God, is going to make sure that that's covered in grace, and there will be blessings from it always. So when I can really, like, marinate in that, it doesn't matter what I do or don't do. And it doesn't matter what the other people do or don't do, because it's all going to work out in the end.
Yeah. That is, I'm getting major truth chills from this, from your insights about this. Thank you so much, because, what that thing about doing it wrong, no matter what, God, source, spirit, universe, however we want to look at it, has your back. And I think that piece about, first of all, being comfortable with whatever choice is a really, really big thing. I did talk about that a bit in my Mindset for Lightworkers thing, because it's like the thing that we refuse to consider is our biggest point of resistance. And it's often the thing we're clinging to before we're able to fully surrender. And for me, there were years by which I was refusing to consider one particular option in a change. And then finally it came to me that, I have to allow myself to look at this and consider it, and then recognize either way is going to be fine. And once doing that, there's this huge sense of relief that I experienced, at least. And it was nice, and that's good positive reinforcement for doing that again. But then in time, sometimes it's easy to forget that, no, we can't talk about that. Those are the undiscussable things that people just, it's the stuff that's so embedded in our belief system and our value system sometimes, that we just can't allow ourselves to go there until we do. And we shift our mindset, even just allowing it. So I think that's a really big thing. There was something else. I may have already said this a little bit, but the thing about believing it's going to be okay either way is where trust comes into for me, and that really close relationship between surrender and trust. I see them as different things, and and I'm still kind of toggling with trust and belief. I don't think are the same thing either.
I don't either.
And I don't know that I can articulate how I see the difference, but certainly feel free to to share your definitions. But just trust in general is like, that's a really hard part to achieve as well. Like, it's going to all be fine. You surrender, but then you trust. Or maybe you trust and then you surrender. I don't really know if there's a process, an order.
I don't either. I don't know that there's an order, but I agree that they're all, belief, trust, and surrender for me are all different things. For a long time, I mean, since birth, I believed in a higher power. I believed in God. I believed there was something. I didn't believe this was it. I just, whatever that instinct is, I had the belief. No one taught it to me. I just had the belief. But I don't think I trusted God until I might have been 29 years old the first time I actually trusted God, because I had all these questions and I had these, I think trust is something that you, gets built, maybe there's a little seed of it in between two people, but it blooms over time. The more you know someone, the more you trust them, the more you see their behavior, whether they're consistent, whether they do what they say they're going to do, whether they're kind, all these things. Like, there's lots of things that go into trusting or having trust broken. And so for me, I believed, but I didn't necessarily trust. And I do think it's easier to surrender when you trust, because even sometimes when I trust that God is going to, I trust God today. Well, I say I do. Sometimes I don't follow that up with practice, but, on a head level, I trust. Sometimes it doesn't filter down into the heart, but I think surrender does come easier when we have that sense of trust of, like, if you're going to be caught on the way down, you wouldn't, if you're not going to hit the bottom of the canyon, it wouldn't matter what the way down felt like. You would, and I think that requires trust. So for me, surrender is easier when I trust, but also sometimes I have to surrender to gain trust. So I don't think there's like a particular order, because sometimes even if I don't trust, it's still in my best interest to surrender. And then once I do that and I see how it works out, that builds my trust.
Like that positive reinforcement part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the trust fall, I don't know if you've ever been to like a team building thing where you like have to fall into your team members' arms. I mean, I can't say I like that exercise, or, I'm not sure they're not going to drop me, but after they don't drop me, then I'm like, okay, it was worth doing. But yeah.
That trust fall, I have not ever done that. I've, and then of course there are really fun movies where they like do a stage dive and everybody moves away and they fall. That's kind of how I have thought about that. But yeah, I have had this experience. It was years ago, and it's an example of my challenge with trust. Both my husband and daughter can do this, but I cannot. And that's where somebody holds your arm and then they let it go and you let it drop. But you're not thinking about letting it drop. It just naturally drops, right? It's just a little mini way of letting go. Well, I took a Tai Chi class years and years ago, and that was one of the exercises, and I couldn't do it. And the person I was partnered with was trying to teach me how to do it. And then eventually the whole class was trying to teach me how to do it. And eventually the teacher's like, well, you can practice that at home. We're going to have to move on, because I just couldn't do it. Now, I've practiced a little bit more recently, and I did it once, but it was like, wow, it's such an ingrained thing within me to hold a high level of control in some respects. I wonder about the connection between that and empath for me, because I think I've developed a lot of mechanisms of protection, and that may be one of them. And so the concept of trust, in theory, I totally get and buy into. It makes perfect sense to me. And then when I try to put it into practice, it's probably even harder than surrendering for me, although I do think the two have to go hand in hand for it to be effective. So it's like I'm trust-ish,
Yeah. Well, and I think there's I don't know that we have to do it perfect either, because even small steps of surrender will still get me where I want to go. But there is more freedom when I just really let go and be willing to like fake it till you make it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where, like you said, trust-ish. Okay, I'm gonna trust you with this, even though my mind says like, I'm not sure it's gonna work out. I'm not sure it's gonna be good. I'm not sure, you know, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna just go for it anyway and see, and, you know, and then watch and see. And I think to me, that's like trust-ish is
Yeah.
I still don't know, but I'm gonna just like pretend it's gonna be okay until, you know, and it will.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know it will be, but I don't know that I'm gonna like everything that transpires until then.
Yeah.
And I have a good friend who said, you know, the one time in her life that she really felt fully surrendered, she lost everything. I mean, she lost her husband, she lost her house, she lost her job. She had 5 kids at home, small kids who were, you know, there's, you know, the husband left and they didn't have any money and she didn't know what she was going to do. And she talks about she would just lay in the front lawn and she just had this moment of cussing out God in her front lawn. And then she felt this sense of peace just come over her, that it was all going to be okay. And the end of the story is good. It was all okay. You know, she and her life radically transformed, but that wasn't what she wanted. That wasn't what she expected to get when she fully surrendered. But God removed things from her life that were not serving her. And,
Mm.
you know, it turned out happy, but for a while that wasn't a happy story.
Yeah.
And so I do think that surrender can be scary because we don't know what's going to happen. And we don't, you know, I like to know before I do something, you know, the probability
Yeah.
or some possibilities of what's going to happen. I really don't like surprises. So that's hard because the spiritual journey is full of surprises, full of
Yes.
them.
Yes. And you know, I like surprises, but in a certain context. You
Yeah.
know? Like if somebody wants to surprise me by like, I don't know, like a surprise birthday party or something, totally
Mm-hmm.
for that. But surprise, your whole life is changing and we're not going to tell you anything about what that is, how it's going to end up and all of that stuff. That's not the kind of surprise I enjoy at all.
No.
I do think it's a thing that's sticking in my mind is it's those spaces in between. It's like there's something, you know, that like maybe status quo, and then there's a change, but between knowing there's some kind of change or that there's something shifting and the actual outcome of that is all that space in between that I think when we watch things like the movies or even reading books and stuff like that, those are the parts they don't always talk about. It's like,
Yeah.
so there's a book that I read recently and I was very, it was very powerful for me and it's called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And I read it in, I mean, over the course of 2 days, but I'd say condensed it was, oh, you know, within a day. I mean, it's like, I don't know, 300 pages or something, but I was just like, you know, every waking moment reading this book. And, um, and I really enjoyed it because he talked about having an experience where he felt complete and total surrender and then recognized that that's how he must live his life. I don't think he's, I mean, his hope is everybody learns to do this, but I don't think it's necessarily everybody's path to do this. But for him, he taught, the whole book is examples of what happened because he surrendered. And for him, that surrender was leaning into that resistance because somebody would say, hey, you should do this thing. And he's like, I don't want to do that thing. But then he's like, oh, I better, you know, this is a part of my surrender experience. So he did it and it would change his life. And really, I mean, he started out as a guy living in a VW van in a like a quarry in Florida or something to a guy who ran a multi-billion-dollar company. All of those experiences because he said yes and surrendered into where he was feeling resistance. Now, I really appreciated those stories, but there are a couple of things that stood out. One is that those places in between, not talked about a whole lot. There was a little bit towards the end, but most
Mm-hmm.
of them are like, I said, yes, this happened and everything was awesome. Now, there were some negative experiences he also had that was very, I actually really appreciated his including it because it was the positive outcome, but having like big, huge, life disrupting change in the way. And there was uncertainty there, but I don't know that from an emotional standpoint it was expressed all that much. It was more analytical in that way, probably because it
Mm-hmm.
really was a very emotionally impactful thing for him. But being in that space now, it's like, well, you know, there's not a lot to grab onto around the best ways to be during that point of uncertainty, that from point A to, not that it's always a point A to point B thing, but thinking linearly, let's assume that, it starts and it ends. Doesn't really ever end, but
Yeah. But this piece of it, yeah, because I call that the hallway, where it's like one door closed,
Awesome.
the other one hasn't opened yet, but you're just kind of like, there's two closed doors and you're sitting in the hallway waiting for, kind of like the
Yes.
next thing. And I've heard people call it the mean time, and it's like mean time. It feels mean. It's not a
Oh,
good, the
yeah.
mean time.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
so I think just for me, first acknowledging like I'm in the hallway, or this is the mean time, and knowing that that's normal to not feel great about that. Because for me, anytime I can normalize something, like I'm not the only person who doesn't feel good in the hallway.
Yeah.
Most people don't feel good in the hallway. Most people stress out in the hallway. If I can, because my ego loves to isolate me, really loves that. It's like one of the biggest ways that my ego can get to me is it will just say like, you're not good at this, or you're the only one, you're over dramatic, or, you don't, it's just all these things of like, I'm the only one who's ever felt, or I'm the only one who gets stuck in the hallway. Everybody else looks like they're, moving through their open doors, and I'm just chilling in the hallway. And one of my mentors said, well, if you have to be in the hallway, throw a party in there. If you have to be there, do something that feels good. And Abraham Hicks talks about this a lot, about how, when something is in your vortex, when you're trying to manifest something, you're trying to get some forward motion on something, stop thinking about that thing. Turn your attention to something. Get busy doing something that has nothing to do with that just makes you feel good. So maybe I don't know, when, let's say it's a job situation. Maybe I'm in a hallway between, I've quit one job, or I've been let go from a job, and there's not a new one yet. And so there's that scary in between season. Well, I might as well have fun with my time off. I might as well enjoy. Some people would love to not have a job right now, even though it's financially scary. It's like, okay, so go play in the park, or go see that movie you didn't get to see, or spend more time with the friends that you don't get to spend time with when you are fully employed, or, it's just like being able to make the best of the current circumstances, instead of continually thinking like, man, I'm in this hallway. Man, I'm in this hallway. Man, this hallway sucks. Man, this hallway sucks. It's like, okay, let me put some balloons around. And if I have a good book in the hallway, I feel better. Or, just being able to, I think so much of my life is being able to take care of myself emotionally and be my own supporter and my own self-soother while things are hard, because things are hard sometimes. And there are portions of my journey that just don't feel, they don't feel good. But as long as I can be there for myself during that season, just like I would a best friend, if somebody's struggling, I could just sit with them in the hallway. If I can just be with myself and be present to whatever my experience is. And then when I can, try to have some fun that doesn't have anything to do with whatever the circumstances are, because I tend to be obsessive. I get so like tunnel focused on, I need this to change this way, or I need this to be different. I'm ready. Open the door. And like, somebody would say,
open the door.
Yeah, like
Yes.
I will try to bust the door down, and you can do. I mean, I've done that before, but usually when I'm forcing my way into somewhere, it's something that won't last. It's something that will eventually take me right back to the hallway, because I feel like, there are reasons for things happening. And so if I get impatient, I'm going to get a redo.
Yeah.
It feels like I get a redo, and that's okay too. I mean, it's all okay. Like if I do it, if I bust down that door and it wasn't the right door, then, and I have to do some construction work, and I mean, that's okay, but there's probably a better way. There's probably an easier way where I don't have to get bloody in the process, So.
Well, I love the permission. I mean, I love the metaphor of the hallway is a really, really, really powerful one for me. In that it's like, I'm in the hallway, and I've just been sitting here in a corner, kind of rocking back and forth in a catatonic state. At least it feels that way sometimes. And then I do pound on the door. It's like, come on, or can I go back in the other door?
Yeah.
But that permission about this part isn't fun. Maybe for some people it is fun sometimes, but it doesn't always feel good. And I think one of the things that have been challenging for me is the shoulds. And, I talk a lot about the shoulds and how the shoulds are basically, that's not great energy to hold because it's a sense of obligation. It's out of alignment with what we really want when we feel we should do something but don't really want to. And the shoulds for me in this case is about feeling like I should have a stronger connection to spirit, feeling like I should be able to handle this in stride and with that level of trust and surrender automatically, like I should just be there, and that that I should also be able to find a way out. And and I think a big part of that has to do with growth, because the way I used to find my way out in the past wasn't necessarily the best way to do it. It was that wanting to maintain control, doing major problem solving, moving from, what was your first A?
Awareness.
Yeah, moving from, well, I don't even know if I went to awareness. I think I just went into action. It was busy work. And so I love your 3 A's. I think that approach is a really good way to slow things down. And I think during these times, we want to make it go faster because it's uncomfortable, but it's important to stay in the pace,
Yeah, I do too. And I think it does build character, when I'm willing to just like, okay, I can, it does show me how strong I am when I can just be steady in even if it's, I'm crying every day, that doesn't mean I'm not steady. Sometimes I have to redefine what it looks like. And I think grief has really helped me with that. Seasons of grief have really taught me that it doesn't have to look pretty to be healing. And most of the time it's not. I think seasons of like restoration and healing, they're messy, they're ugly. Debreeding a wound hurts, that you have to do it to heal it. But that part is really awful. It's leading somewhere good, but sometimes the mess part is just, it's part of the process. And that trusting the process, that's my big right now, like just trusting the process, because it's not all my process. And, I have processes within the big process, but I'm not in charge of that big process. And so I have to remind myself, like, God is bigger than me for a reason. And so I have to trust that that power is greater than my own power, but I have access to that power as well. And so if I, will join my power with that power, then it's really powerful.
Yeah.
And then too, like when you were talking about other people being involved in this situation, I have to also remind myself that God's multitasking. He's not only got my back, but he's got that person's back and that person's back and that person's back. And our journeys may not look the same, but it doesn't mean that we're not headed in the same direction. It doesn't mean that we're not both being cared for or, both learning lessons and both receiving that support. It doesn't always have to look the same, but like I like to manage people. I really do. It's part of my, in my
Are we
household,
twins?
Yeah. In my household, I was the parent. Growing up, I was the parent. And so children don't know how to be good parents. They really don't have any parenting skills. They just kind of do the most survival-y form of parenting. And so I carried that into my adulthood, where I like to manage people, but I actually don't do it very well. I just can get us through it. It's like, I feel like I can just like drag someone along or some sort of survival-y way. And I've learned that if I will take my hands off somebody else's process and just only be with my own, me and God, then that works better for me, because it's too much. Like I have trouble managing myself. And I think for a long time I liked to manage other people, because then I didn't have to look at myself. I didn't have to deal with my feelings and my thoughts and what do I want? What do I believe? I just got to focus out there and do, I know what's best for you. I have no clue what's best for me, but I know what's best for you. So,
well, it's so much easier to see in other people. And,
yeah, it is.
That inner work is challenging. I think even like I'm doing a lot of stuff around shadow work, but I continually get this feeling that there's something right in front of me that I'm missing. And because that in real life, that actually happens. When I'm looking for something, it's almost
Oh
like I
yeah.
can't find it. And then I'm like, well, it's almost always right in front of me and I can't see it. So then I hone in on the center and it's like, oh, there it is. This is, I mean, had somebody help me find a book and I'm like, usually I can't see it because it's right in front of me. And he went right in front of me and found the book. It's like, man, how come I can't see that?
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of tunnel vision. You know, it's multiple potential vision or something. You know, it's like I see everything around me.
Everything but that. Yeah. Well, and that's why I don't like to do this thing alone. And, you know, a community is really important to me, but also like people who, you know, just this week, I went to dinner with my best friend and there was something that I was processing that I thought, I don't want to bring it up at dinner because, you know, it's just too much and I don't want to talk about it anymore. And I was kind of being protective over my own sadness in a way. Like, I don't want to bring misery to the dinner and I don't want to, you know, I don't know. I had all these things. And so I wasn't going to talk about it. But as she started to process some stuff in her life, she was sharing with me, you know, that she confessed a secret to another friend and like how freeing it was for her to just talk about what was going on, to say, this is what's happening. And I've been hiding it because I didn't want feedback or I didn't want judgment or I didn't really even want to work through it. I didn't want to address it yet. So I've been hiding it. And she's just talking about how much better she feels. And I'm like, well, on that note, you know, I came in here with the same thing of like, I'm not going to bring this thing that's really bothering me to the table because, you know, A, I didn't really even know if I wanted her to know about it. B, I didn't really want to talk about it, but it was like she just processing her own stuff. She reminded me, you know, secrets don't help us. And so for me, I've got to at least with one person that I can really trust, I've got to say that stuff because most of the time it is that, like when you say, I can't find my glasses and the person says they're on your head, you know? And so just by telling her, you know, this is what's going on. She's like, she was able to give me feedback that was so simple and succinct and like clear as a bell. And I'm like, how did she see? But because she's looking at me, not, you know, I can't see my own stuff. Like, and I do think that we're good at that, which I think is why, you know, I had to work through stepping into my calling of doing coaching and doing spiritual empowerment coaching. You know, I thought like, well, I shouldn't give people, like, kind of like the old coots, like I shouldn't be giving people advice. And today as a coach, I don't give people advice. I, you know, try to help them find their own solution by just sharing my experiences around things, but I don't tell them what to do. But even that, I had to really like own it's okay as a spiritual person and as a spiritual authority or coach to not be happy all the time or not be even doing my own process well, because I can see clearly what someone else can't just because I'm not them and I'm not emotionally attached to their situation. So I still have all the tools, even when I'm not using them in my own life. I still have a lot to give. And that was really, that's been really like encouraging for me that, you know, other people have stuff that I need and I have stuff that they need. And sometimes I'm not having a good day. They might be having a really good day. Or even if they're having a bad day, they're not having a bad day about what I'm having a bad day about. So they still can, you know, pour into me. And it's only the times when I'm really enmeshed with somebody in the same problem that we, you know, we can't help each other through it. I've got to go somewhere else with fresh perspective. So,
well, and I find that fresh perspective, well, just so amazingly helpful. But I just recognized, you know, I think there's always been a social stigma, and maybe it's relaxing a bit in some places. And I tend to think it's a more feminine energy approach to things around sharing challenging situations, especially life challenges, because we've been conditioned, many of us, to be stoic about it, and that if you can't handle your own stuff, then you're weak, or you're failing, all of those big heavy hitter words. And I was certainly raised in that. I don't think anybody specifically said it. It was just that, that energy, like, you don't share stuff. And it's like, I've gotten to the point I mean, putting myself in a place of vulnerability takes a lot of courage
It does.
especially depending on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I like to try. I've learned through the years that there are people I can talk to, and I know that they're not going to try to problem solve and fix the situation, that they're able to listen and hear and see me and hear me, and then ask or offer feedback, but only once, there are some who are like, would you like some feedback? Or I'll just go in and say, I'd like your feedback.
Yeah.
Why not cut to the chase? But there are other people where I don't want to talk to them because I know they're going to give me advice based on their own perspective that really doesn't have anything to do with what I said, because they've connected with something I said and identified with it, but then they put it into
Mm-hmm.
their own stuff, and then the advice you get is theirs for them. But they're not
Yeah.
seeing it, and then it's
Yeah.
like, it's not helpful at all to me. Then I go into coaching mode and ask them questions about their thing, which I suppose can take me out of it, but I don't feel heard or understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that finding that community is a really important thing, the community of people, and knowing who those people are. Sometimes it's great to go to a person who can see holes in a situation and point those out quickly. But when
Yeah.
I'm feeling vulnerable and emotional, that's not the person I want to talk to.
No. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think knowing, okay, who's the right person for this situation or this season is really important, because I did that a lot too, where I would go to somebody who really wasn't the appropriate person to talk to about it, and then felt worse after the conversation.
Yeah.
And so, now I've gotten better at knowing who's a safe person for this season. And when I do want the hard truth, when I want someone to just say like, well, then I know who to go to for that too. So and all of that comes down to just, I think that is us working our process and being our own best advocate, because
yes,
I don't know that if I didn't learn that some people aren't safe and some people, who to go to when, I would still be doing that same thing where I just want someone to understand me, hear me, validate me, when they don't have that to give. They don't have that in their DNA. Or that's just not how they operate in those kinds of conversations. And so I think it's really a lot of growth to be able to discern who's appropriate for what situation. And I don't know, there's a book by, his name is Sean Aker, and it's called The Happiness Project. And I don't know exactly everything about it, but he talks about the Zorro circle. And it's basically the concept that, like, when Zorro was learning to sword fight, his master had him stand in a very small circle that was just maybe 2 feet around his body. And he could only move, a step forward, a step back, a step side to side. And until he mastered that circle, he didn't get to move to a bigger circle where he was, adding more elements. And then the circle would widen every time he mastered. And the theory is that when you're in a season where mastery maybe not be, because I think sometimes when I'm really in that hallway or I'm very sensitive emotionally, mastery isn't like on a big scale. I'm not even after that. So I've got to narrow my circle down to me, God, and then the really close people that I can trust. And it's like I almost like need a cocoon of, and then master that circle. And then I can widen it out a little bit more. And then I can widen it out a little bit more. And so being able to, shrink and widen your circle depending on where you are, that's been a really important thing for me to do for myself spiritually and emotionally in different seasons, because some people aren't safe for every season of life. Right. It doesn't mean they're not good people or they aren't valuable to my life, but I'm not going to let everybody into every part of my life. It's just not good for me. Right. So, sometimes in the hallway, my circle gets real small, and I have to be careful that it doesn't turn into isolation, because that is that is somewhere I can go.
I love the way that you call it. I mean, that you've called it a circle. That Zorro circle is a really helpful visual, because what I was thinking when you were talking is that, well, for me in the past, if I didn't look at it in terms of a circle, it would just be me. I would isolate totally. But when it's called a circle, it means it implies, to me at least, more than just me, even though it could, I mean, I'm around. Of course, I'm just a circle by myself, I guess, if I want to be, but, but when I consider a circle, it means people. And just the other day, I pulled this card, Three of Cups, which was also a playing card called Three of Hearts. And it was ultimately about you've got people. And it's like at least a couple of people that I know that I can trust, that I can speak openly about emotionally what's going on, and that I know they've got me, as well as, spirit in my relationship with source and all of, and angels and even my higher self. It's like sometimes I close myself from all of that, and I'm trying very hard not to do that this time. And so really looking at it as a circle is a helpful way for me to keep that space open for the people I know who do have my back, people and, spirit. So thank you. I was going to ask you something about seasons of grief, because I know the stages of grief, right? And there's a couple of different stages that
models,
So, but seasons of grief, I'm very curious about. Is that something different? Is that from a book? What? Because it sounded, you mentioned a couple of words after that I thought were really like, wow, those are great ways to look at it. Like reconstruction, I think was something you said.
Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know where I've heard that. It might be my own. A lot of the things I say are not original, and like this one might be. Seasons are something that I feel like God really illuminates for me. That like the actual seasons: fall, winter, spring, summer, and that all of those seasons happen every single year. All of those seasons are necessary. And so I just mapped that onto like life. Like I have seasons in life, and sometimes I have a season where, it's springtime and things are starting to bloom. And other times I'm, planting seeds for the next spring, or, I see that metaphor. For me, it's a really good way. So I use the word seasons a lot just because I love that vision. And I think what I meant when I said seasons of grief is there are points in my life where I can, there's like age this to this, that was a season of grief where I was really grieving, or, this time in my life, there were definitely pockets for me of grief, whether that was from a death or from loss of a relationship or loss of a job or loss of anything. Grief can be anything. It doesn't have to just be death, but there have been some notable seasons of my life where grief was really present. And sometimes that was before I had any skill set and I was a really hot mess. And then there are times I've grieved really intentionally and it still was messy, but it was a beautiful mess instead of, just like crazy mess. So, and that's something that's important to me too. I can do hard things today. I've learned about myself that I'm strong and capable of doing the hard stuff. I don't want to do hard and crazy anymore. That's too much. So I can do hard and stretchy and like, things I don't like, but if it's also nuts, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. Things that make it crazy, that add elements of like, I don't think everything has to be super hard. And that's something I've had to take a look at myself, where I think a lot of times when I learn lessons, I go straight to like, it would be walking into a karate class and saying like, teach me all the black belt moves. And I don't know, I never took a karate class. Like, I'm not going to be a black belt overnight. And to try to do that training would be hurtful. I mean, I don't have any basic skills. And so but I do that. I find myself doing that a lot where I want to like,
skip ahead.
Yeah. And there's just no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts.
It kind of goes back to that hallway. It's like, how long is that hallway? And it's not up to us to necessarily,
to know,
blueprint that out. It's like, I have in my mind, it's a really small hallway, but it isn't feeling like a really small hallway right now at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that going back to the topic of surrender and letting go, that's when the stages of grief popped into my head. And then you followed shortly after with the seasons of grief. Seasons sound much more comfortable to me in they're palatable.
Yeah.